Whether you're in games, music, or movies, there's always that one difficult problem. When you make something amazing, how do you follow it up? How do you strike gold twice?
As a child, I yearned for the mines.
Portal 1 was one of those games that shouldn't really have been a hit. It was a brand new IP from Valve, and yet it swept up awards and won over almost everyone who touched it. For me, it was the first time I realized puzzle games could be fun. And this was at a time when I was 12 years old, getting verbally assaulted in Modern Warfare 2 lobbies. The thing for me about Portal 1 is, it wasn't just a near-perfect game, it ended near-perfectly for a standalone title. You blow up GLaDOS and projectile explode yourself out of the roof of Aperture Science, and that's the end.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
It was a clean ending to a clean and tight game. There was no cliffhanger, but when Valve decided to make a sequel, they patched its ending, adding that small change where presumably the party escort bot drags you back inside the facility. That alone tells me they didn't plan a sequel from the start, but after the success that Portal 1 had, they didn't really have a choice. So how do you take an experience that was meant to be standalone and deliver something even better using it as a foundation? That was the problem to solve. So in true Valve fashion, they got the band back together for a second time. As a developer, to succeed in making a sequel, you have to be completely in tune with what made the original work. You need to understand it on a deep level, and then somehow build more on top of that without losing the soul underneath. It's a delicate balance. You have to give the fans something new, but make sure it still feels like the previous game just enough. Whilst the ending of the game needed a little retconning, the rest of the game world was wide open for expansion. Portal's format naturally lends itself to a sequel on behalf of being a chamber-based puzzle game. Shell was just one of countless test subjects that could be explored. Aperture Science was this huge underground facility with relatively little information about its purpose. And there were already hints about a connection to Half-Life's universe. And in my opinion, above everything else, they had the best character at the center of it. And the fans just wanted more of her. All of that gave Valve something strong to build on. Now, a lot of sequels fall into the trap of going bigger, trying to appeal to new audiences, and losing sight of what the previous game even was. The best example of this for me is Fallout 4. A lot of what I and almost everybody else loved about Fallout 3 essentially just got thrown in the bin. The skills and traits, the world full of stories, and the meaningful dialogue choices that you can actually read before selecting how to reply, rather than just yes, no, sarcastic yes, and maybe. All of that was replaced by an oversimplified leveling system, a world that was emptier and cheerful, and a voiced protagonist that literally no one asked for.
Think we can handle it? We could always call in the Marines.
Oh. Ha ha.
If you want to make a sequel that doesn't suck, you have to understand why people loved the first one, then somehow create that same feeling through different methods. Hideo Kojima is an expert on this. All of the 5 mainline Metal Gear Solid games are vastly different in tone, setting, and even the protagonist that you play as, but they all hit the mark of doing something different, but creating the same feeling. He really was so good at capturing the magic of his games in a bottle and formulaically being able to repeat on it without just copying and pasting. And you know what? Valve made a really good go at this with Portal 2. They expanded on the story, the world, and the mechanics, and for the most part kept everything that made Portal special in the first place. But there are still a lot of issues with it, in my opinion. So, is Portal 2 really as good as we remember? Given Portal 1 had just one character that was absolute perfection, and almost as central to its success as the actual gameplay, how do you deal with expanding on that? Well, they tried to add 2 more. Wheatley is an intelligence dampening sphere. He was basically created as a hindrance for GLaDOS by Aperture. He acts as your friend in the first part of the game, seemingly helping you escape the facility and destroy GLaDOS. But this comes back around and bites you right in the ass as he goes crazy with power as soon as you dethrone GLaDOS. This kicks off the old Aperture part of the game after he crams you down an elevator shaft like a toddler smacking a square shape into a round hole.
Block that would fit
the semicircle.
Semicircle?
The semicircle.
That's right, it's the square hole.
His design is like this whimsical little orb, clearly inspired by the personality cores from the first game. But they made him a bit more expressive and cartoonish to fit his constant chatter and general dumbassishness. Now that is a cool word, dumbassishness. Get it in the dictionary. Can someone call the dictionary? How do I do this? His voice, of course, comes from the great Stephen Merchant, and if you've ever heard Merchant speak, you'll know he's basically just playing himself in this game. It probably feels this way because during development he did a lot of improvisation with the lines that stayed in the final game. Apparently they actually recorded over 10,000 voice lines during development, which sounds like a lot. Now you guys might feel differently about this, but it really annoyed me that he had a fully human voice. And what I mean by that is GLaDOS, all the cores in the last game and the cores in this game, all have robotic filters like an auto-tune. The writing in this game for Wheatley isn't laugh out loud funny, it's more whimsical little tee-hees. Actually, by today's standards, it's pretty annoying.
Yeah, I can't do it if you're watching. Seriously, I'm not joking. Could you just turn around for a second?
But I know for a fact when this came out, I did laugh a lot at his jokes. I can definitely scratch that off as a result of the times changing and humour along with it. The second new character that they introduced was Cave Johnson, voiced by the legendary J.K. Simmons. Yeah, he's the get me pictures of Spider-Man guy.
I trust my barber.
Cave Johnson is one of the most memorable voices in Portal 2. Compared to Stephen Merchant's neurotic Wheatley, Simmons apparently nailed his lines in just a few recording sessions, which honestly, I believe, considering how effortlessly he delivers that booming, corporate, meth head energy. What's crazy is that Valve actually originally planned for Cave Johnson to be the main character of Portal 2. You would have actually played as him, trapped inside a computer. That whole concept was eventually scrapped, and later he was reworked as the game's main villain, and that also got cut. Apparently there's still traces of that early direction in unused voice lines hidden in the game files, and the writers even mention it in interviews back when Portal 2 was being launched. Now personally for me, I've never been as big on Cave as some fans are, but I do love how his dialogue works as a storytelling device. My favourite parts are when he's just recounting the history of Aperture, those sections where you hear the rise and fall of the company through his old recordings. I also really like the way we get to see his descent into madness over time. He starts out as this positive young guy that loves science and shower curtains, and he ends up as a bitter sick man. I always preferred listening to this side of him over the constant quippy one-liners and jokes. We already had two characters who handled that better, Wheatley and GLaDOS, so the moments where Cave steps back and just tells the story were the ones that really stood out to me. This is of course with a big exception of the lemon speech.
Alright, I've been thinking. When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Get mad! I don't want your damn lemons! What am I supposed to do with these?
To be honest, the first right choice they made was deciding to bring GLaDOS back. It simply wouldn't be Portal without her, and I'm so surprised they considered having her not be in the game at all.
Could you murder this bird for me? Oh, thanks.
She's back with her slightly arousing, auto-tuned robotic sass, and it's exactly the part of the game that the fans just wanted more of. Wait, did he just say slightly arousing? Some of the funniest lines in the game come yet again from GLaDOS. My favourite new insult is that she just starts fat-shaming Shell on the regular.
This plate must not be calibrated to someone of your generousness. I'll add a few zeros to the maximum weight. You look great, by the way. Very healthy.
When you awaken her at the beginning of the game, she's still very angry with you. That anger hasn't faded one bit, because when she died, she spent the whole time reliving her death on repeat thanks to a quick save system of sorts. Yeah, I mean, if I had to relive my death over and over and over and over again for a considerable amount of years, I'd probably be pretty pissed too. My only bugbear here is that once she's converted into a flipping potato, her voice becomes incredibly whiny, and it loses that sleek sexiness that she has when she's in her big girl body.
For science.
I love you.
Monster.
Unfortunately, she spends a lot of time in this whiny mode, just attached to the end of your portal gun. I don't know if you guys will get this reference, but if you've ever watched any of Kit Boger's videos where he pretends to be an old lady to bait scammers, I couldn't help but hear this when GLaDOS was speaking.
To have one person do something and the next person do something, right?
Are you mad? Are you mad?
We also discover a lot more about GLaDOS' backstory. While we're escaping from the old testing facility, GLaDOS discovers that her personality originally came from someone called Caroline, who was an assistant to Cave Johnson. Caroline's consciousness was later uploaded into the GLaDOS program, and it's suggested that this might have been done against her will by Cave Johnson. Some people even say that GLaDOS' design is meant to resemble a restrained, hanging body to represent this.
Some vouchers ready?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson. Why did I just... Who is that? What the hell is going on?
Aside from her backstory, she even has a positive character arc in this game, which I think we can all appreciate. You're not exactly best buds in the end, but she's definitely over trying to kill you at least. However, in my opinion, the first few chapters when you accidentally reboot her and she puts you into testing are among my favourite in the game. Not only do we get to explore the beautiful, derelict and newly overgrown aperture science that's just brimming with atmosphere, we get to do it with our best girl.
And I'm sorry. You didn't react at the time, so I was worried it sailed right over your head, which would have made this apology seem insane. That's why I had to call you garbage a second time just now.
Now you might think that I'm boring for these moments being my favourite, but I've always been a sucker for fan service. Speaking of fan service, there are quite a few callbacks to the first game, with Ratman Dens and the Companion Cube making an appearance. But interestingly, they decide not to talk about cake really at all in this game, which I'm relieved about because that became the most annoying meme of the 2000s. It was actually mentioned in an interview that the devs found it annoying too, hence its relative absence compared to other tropes that do make a comeback. But Portal isn't obviously just about the characters. I'd even argue that the gameplay is its best feature. The attraction for newcomers to the first game came almost entirely from the Portal mechanic itself. Valve added turrets, cubes, and a few very clever twists around that idea, and it was enough to make that gameplay pretty special. The genius, however, of Portal 1 was the pace in which it ramped up the difficulty. Every new puzzle asked you to mix the mechanics and tricks you'd learned in previous chambers into something new to solve a new problem. For a game where you go through identical looking chambers over and over, it somehow managed to not feel repetitive. In Portal 2, they keep that same core idea, but expand on it. My favourite example of the new mechanics is the gels that you find deeper into the facility about halfway through the game. There are 3 types. Orange speeds you up, blue lets you bounce, and white turns any surface into a portal surface. The gels are a whole different ballgame to what we've seen before. They're loose and splashy, and you can throw them around through portals any which way you want, then use them wherever they land, and because of that, it often feels like there's more than one defined way to reach the solution of each puzzle. Whether there actually is or not almost becomes irrelevant. It feels a bit more fun and chaotic. You can even cover the turrets in that blue gel to send them into a perpetual nightmare of torment, bouncing all over the walls and shit, which is a cool detail that I liked. This is considering the fact that you usually have quite a limited arsenal to take down threats in this game. However, I did feel sometimes that I was splashing my shit around very incorrectly, only to succeed somehow in the end. This is good because it feels like you're solving it in your own way, but the reward of succeeding in what feels like your own way is also the shame of dying in your own way too. They also add aerial faith plates that really capitalize on how fun it is to fling yourself and other objects across the facility and test chambers. They introduce floating bridges and light bridges that you can manipulate with portals. The floating bridges can even carry gel across the test chamber, letting you drop it exactly where it couldn't reach before. The light bridges can be used as barriers to fling yourself or objects into the exact right spot, or just walk across them. Just don't try and eat it, okay, fatty?
If you rubbed your cheek on one, it would be like standing outside with the sun shining on your face. It would also set your hair on fire, so don't actually do it.
They've also added new types of cubes. No, unfortunately it's not a kissable companion cube. Oh, and since we're on the topic of the companion cube, I was really disappointed in all of you that went against my strict instructions not to search up the fan art. Really disappointed, naughty little bags. The new cubes are like laser redirecting cubes. I'm not really sure what their actual name is, but they add a great new dynamic by letting you redirect lasers in different directions instead of you just blocking them. You can even use them to burn turrets. There's one whole tutorial puzzle dedicated to these cubes, and it's oddly soothing, like a brief break from the madness in this padded cell. Now when you start adding new mechanics like these, the potential complexity multiplies with each new addition. In my last video on Portal 1, I compared the puzzle's difficulty progression to that of a Rubik's Cube. The link's up in the corner if you want to check out that video. Now in Portal 2, it's like they've taken that same Rubik's Cube and upgraded it to the one that has 12 sides. More inputs, more variables, more potential problems, and more potential solutions. I spent a lot longer just staring at the screen trying to figure out what the game wanted from me. The puzzles in Portal 1 were never massively complex. You might get stuck for a few seconds to a minute on your first playthrough, unless we're talking about the fire pit in Chamber 19 that my hobo ass struggled with. But the pacing, the way the complexity ramps up, was perfect. These extra challenges in Portal 2 are great and a really fun time, but they slow the pacing down in places, especially during sections where you're meant to be moving quickly. I can already read the comments now. What, you found Portal 2 difficult? Do you work for IGN? Go fuck yourself, Bag, you useless piece of... Another downside is that every new feature they introduce needs a few tutorial chambers to teach you how it works. So while the game's longer, a bigger portion of it is just spent learning. Maybe that's fair given the expanded scope, but it still means more time in training mode before you hit your stride. And I think this affected how many people stuck with the game to the end. We can see this by looking at the achievements of each game on Steam. 50% of players completed Portal 1, whilst only 32% completed Portal 2. It's so funny to compare this with the achievements of a game like Bloodborne, where only 45% of players that pick up the game have ever beaten Father Gascoigne, and he's literally the first boss in the game. So I think overall you've got to say the way Portal 2 developed the gameplay itself is nothing short of a success that carried some necessary evils to implement it. Now, a big contributing factor to how the gameplay and characters are received are the world you put them in and the story you want to tell. For the most part, Portal 2 gets rid of the slick and familiar test chamber setup that we got used to for the majority of the first game. I think it's obvious that they had to expand on this, and expand they did. When you start out, you're already in an unfamiliar setting in what looks like a hotel room. Not long after, you're making your way through what I like to call overgrown Aperture. It's quite clever because it's not actually a new setting, you're very much in the same place as the first game here, which you can even see from repeated test chambers from the first game itself. What they changed is the when. How much when? I don't know, to be honest. When is the where though? Maybe. We're thrown, according to the devs, somewhere between 50 and 50,000 years into the future, which is potentially the most unhelpful statement you're going to hear this video.
You have been in suspension for 99999.
I love this part of the game. The visuals are banging. You've got the thick greenery that's overtaken the sterile white. Actual daylight shining from above, where previously we had bright luminous white lights. And now we have brown murky puddles on the floor. Hooray. The whole place has essentially gone to shit in the most visually appealing way, and it's a joy to explore. Later, after awakening our best girl GLaDOS,
wake up, honey,
she puts us through some tests. As she's doing this, we can actually see the place getting rebuilt in real time, and it goes to show how a static robot runs a facility like this. We see that all the panels are essentially controlled by lots of individual robot arms, which is such a cool concept and actually explains how the test chambers are put together. After GLaDOS is awoken, she starts literally pulling the place back together after untold years of decay, and it's already starting to feel much more like the original place after running a few chambers with her.
I'm going through the list of test subjects in cryogenic storage. I managed to find 2 with your last name. A man and a woman. So that's interesting. It's a small world.
If you compare one of the last chambers before you go to overthrow her with Wheatley to one of the first ones when she wakes up, it's a massive improvement, and I think that's such a cool and subtle detail not many people have pointed out. She is genuinely rebuilding the place in front of our eyes. After she's overthrown, this is where Portal 2 gets really clever. That phrase, hit you into next week, gets taken somewhat literally. Wheatley smacks the shit out of us until we fall for a very, very, very long time, all the way to the bottom of Aperture Science. And this is where we see the biggest departure from Portal 1. Cave Johnson, the founder of Aperture, apparently bought this absurdly massive salt mine back in the 1940s and thought, yeah, this is a good place to do some weird stuff. So, the first version of Aperture was built right here, at the bottom. Every few decades, they just kept building upward, which means by the time we reach Portal 1 in the timeline, the place has grown layer upon layer, until it's basically reached the surface. So when Wheatley smacks us down here, it's not just a physical fall, it's like falling through time. Down here, everything is different. The sterile white panels are gone. Instead, you've got rusted metal, echoing tunnels, and half-dead lighting. Even the loading screens change, which is such a subtle touch that really sells the feeling that you've not just gone somewhere, but somewhen. See what I did there? There are 3 distinct areas of Aperture that we move through, each one marked by a new portrait of Cave Johnson looking a little older, with some slightly more unhinged sideburns. The 1950s are all about optimism and ambition. Aperture is testing astronauts, war heroes, and Olympians. Everything is painted in that post-war can-do attitude. Except, of course, they're testing deadly science experiments on people for fun. Then comes the 1970s, where the optimism fades and the desperation sets in. The funding's drying up, and the test subjects have gone from war heroes to basically whoever they can find off the street. Cave starts to shift from brilliance to madness.
Am I in danger? Let me answer those questions with a question. Who wants to make $60? Cash. You can also feel free to relax for up to 20 minutes in the waiting room, which is a damn sight more comfortable than the park benches most of you were sleeping on when we found you.
Finally, in the 1980s era, Cave's voice starts breaking through the intercom, sick and bitter. And this is where the company becomes pretty unhinged, experimenting with uploading consciousness into machines. And this eventually gives birth to GLaDOS herself. You'll also see those familiar white walls and colour schemes starting to creep in, which is a nice detail to really nail home that we're getting closer to the present day. You also get one of the most interesting bits of Half-Life crossover lore down here. If you dig around, you'll find a giant boat docking station hidden behind a few doors. Supposedly, this is where the Borealis from Half-Life was kept. Cave even mentions a teleportation experiment, which lines up perfectly with the ship's backstory. And this boat is most likely going to be central to how Half-Life ends up concluding, if it ever comes out.
It's been 84 years.
Now, as much as I love the lore in this section, I can't pretend the visuals here are easy on the eyes. Everything's brown, wet, and kind of looks like it smells. I get it, it's supposed to look abandoned, but man, this part of the game looks like it's just had coffee spilt all over it. And the gameplay actually worsens, at least when it comes to the portaling elements. There are way fewer portal surfaces here, which sometimes makes it too obvious where to go next. It's not bad, but it definitely changes the flow from clever puzzle solving to almost like spelunking or exploration. Still, this entire section is genius from a storytelling perspective. It's the point where the game stops being about escaping and starts being about understanding what Aperture actually was. And it's Valve just showing off how good they are at world building. By the time we climb back to the surface, it feels like we've literally crawled out of history. The final area we get to explore is basically what I call the fucked up version of Aperture. We get back to the top where Wheatley has been in charge for all of 5 minutes and could not have done a worse job. The robotic arms that were working beautifully to rebuild the facility in real time under GLaDOS are just malfunctioning and banging their shit about in quite a sad way. The whole place is about to basically explode to fuck right now as a result of being under Wheatley's leadership, with it rumbling and shaking constantly. Wheatley's even screwed up the turrets and boxes in a way that resembles that scene from The Fly. You know that Cronenberg film? That is yuccas. The way that Valve develops the game's world is overall very good in my opinion. It's not a new setting, it's just a new time. We experience the same Aperture, but in the past, present, and future somewhat. I also find it quite interesting how they always have a main character running the show for each area, and how that environment you're in reflects them. For example, Aperture under Wheatley is dumb, clumsy, and uncoordinated. Aperture under Cave is Cigar Lounge-esque, and under GLaDOS, sleek and robotic. When I said at the start of the video that you have to find a creative way to give fans more of what they love, without just copying and pasting, this is a perfect example of that done well. When you think Portal 2, you think, oh yeah, it's got all these cool new locations compared to the first game. But when you actually think about it, you spend the whole time in the same place you did as the first game. You're just experiencing it at different times in the facility's history. Obviously, what adds to the atmosphere created by the game is the music. It's a huge part. As far as OSTs go, this one's right up there. It knows how to exacerbate the tense moments, how to create more wonder in new and strange parts of the story, and get your blood pumping in the fast sequences.
Stalemate detected. Transfer procedure cannot continue.
But I think the most notable part of the music is how it dynamically reacts to what you're doing. As you get closer to solving a puzzle, the music ramps up.
Toxin at 0%, yes! Hold on.
But not just this. As you slide on the orange or bounce on the blue gel, it reacts to this too with some futuristic science glitchy sounds. And these are as good as, if not better, than sex. It's almost like the game is getting excited with you. It knows you're doing something cool, progressing to that reward moment of solving the puzzle, and it's like it's right there with you, nudging you on the shoulder saying, this is fun, isn't it? And I just think that's a really cool feature that I haven't heard many people talk about. In terms of story, this is where they expanded probably the most. Portal 2 blesses us with a much longer runtime, around 8 hours compared to the 2 or 3 from the first game. We've already covered the early and mid sections, but my favourite part has always been the final boss fight. After slogging through Wheatley's cursed test chambers, as the facility literally falls apart, we reach its big finale. I'll say it once. Yes, the ending is basically the same as Portal 1. Big evil robot, neurotoxin countdown, throwing bombs using portals. The whole routine. The main difference in Portal 2 is that instead of tossing GLaDOS's cores off her, this time we're attaching corrupted ones onto Wheatley. And honestly, if I wasn't so wrapped up in it, if I wasn't having such a good time, so invested in the story and riding that wave of nostalgia, I'd probably have some critiques here. But that's no fun. What really makes it better for me is doing it with GLaDOS. You're teaming up with your old enemy, using everything you've learned to outsmart Wheatley while she drops these rotten cores for you to stick onto him. Fun fact, all of those cores are voiced by Nolan North. And he also voices the defective turrets you run into earlier. Towards the end of the fight, Wheatley tries to blow us up, knocking Shell to the floor and blowing a hole through the ceiling. As she lies there, she looks up and boom, she fires a portal straight to the moon, creating a vacuum in the boss chamber and violently ripping Wheatley and herself through. It's easily the best moment in both games. Just like breaking out of Chamber 19 in Portal 1, it's a single, iconic, think outside of the box solution. And when I first played it, I didn't clock it right away either. I just laid on the floor looking up thinking, what am I meant to do? What makes it even cooler this time though is how it ties back to the old Aperture sections. Cave Johnson mentions that the white portal gel was made from lunar dust, the same stuff that ended up poisoning him. So that one point from hours earlier subtly sets up the ending of the entire game, that you can put a portal on the moon itself. It's perfect foreshadowing, and probably the most iconic moment in the series. GLaDOS then regains control and saves Shell. After we have a little debrief with GLaDOS, she has her rockin' bod back, and finally allows us to leave. As you go up the elevator, it obviously gives you a couple of fun little sing-songs at the end. One from GLaDOS, one from an orchestra of turrets. And when we reach the top, we get to see an old friend. So, is Portal 2 really as good as we remember? I'd say that despite its flaws, it's a brilliantly executed sequel. Valve made all the right calls on where to take it, and it's really wild to think that it almost didn't have GLaDOS in it. Sure, it gets a bit repetitive with its story beats, especially towards the end when you're taking down Wheatley, but it nails everything fans actually wanted more of. More GLaDOS-style characters, more Aperture, and more genuinely impressive puzzles. It captures the same magic that made the first game so special, which is the hardest thing for any sequel to do, and then it builds on it without losing what made it work in the first place. All in all, I'd say Portal 2 isn't quite as perfect as I remember, but it's still an incredible sequel and an incredible game. Thank you so much for watching, love you long time, bag out.